Hello everyone. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up in the comments, because last time I had some issues and so I want to make sure. Yay, perfect. Okay, I don't know, we were traveling back and my husband had it plugged into the auxiliary cord, and I don't know if that just kind of threw everything off, but it looks like we're in good shape, back in business, here to talk about some math centers today. But before we get going in that, hello everyone. Before we get going into math centers, I have just kind of a question I want to ask, and so I want to get your feedback on it. I have been loving Periscope. I know a lot of teachers have as well. So here's a little question. I'm going to take a poll. If you would rather listen/watch Periscopes than read a blog post, so basically if you think that Periscope is the bomb.com, I want you to give me one of the little bomb emojis in the comments. So if you would prefer to watch a Periscope and see things live and how they work, give me a little bomb in the comments down there. If you think Periscope is the bomb.com, show me that in the comments. I'm just trying to figure out who likes what and if we're liking Periscope better. So I'm just trying to figure out from you all. So I wanted to do a quick little survey in the comments, and I will definitely go back and read all of these. They're coming so fast. And then also, a lot of you like both. Me too. I like them for different reasons. And then if this is your first scope with me, if this is your first time with me, give me a firstie in the comments so that way I can see all of my new people, all of my new friends. All right, so I like both. A lot of bombs, so a lot of people are loving Periscope. I see some first timers, so welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you all here. All right, so I don't like to waste a lot of time at the beginning. I'm gonna go ahead and mute this, get it flipped, and say hello to everyone. How are you all today? Have y'all been having a good, it's a Friday, right? Seriously, y'all, I cannot keep up with what day of the week it is. I never can during the summertime. It's always a night. I'm like, is it Monday, Tuesday? Is it Sunday? But I do believe today is Friday. And I am excited to be here and share some math center ideas with you all. So first, I'm really bad about introducing myself. So let me do that first, especially for all the people that are here first time. My name is Hope King. I am a teacher blogger at Elementary Shenanigans. So you can check that out. Also, the information that I will share with you all today will be on my blog. So if you want to check that out, I'm just www.elementaryShenanigans.com. I am also a TPT author, so I create resources and sell them at Teachers Pay Teachers, and you can find my store under my name, just Hope King. Simple, easy. And then I am also a teacher at the Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you haven't heard of the Ron Clark Academy, you can also look that up at ronclarkacademy.com. We're a teacher training facility as well, so you can actually come visit our school. I've done posts on it before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm going to go ahead and get right into what I'm talking about today. Plus, my husband and I are about to go out of town, so I am bound and determined to finally get a scope that might be under 20 minutes, y'all. It's my goal. So start leaving the room or start throwing things at me. I don't know, whatever you have to do to get me out of here in 20 minutes. Got it? If that's a deal, give me another thumbs up in the comments. We're going to go ahead and get rolling. So here's what I want to know. First of all, when I taught math, I no longer teach math, but I have taught so many grade levels. I've taught first, second, third. I have taught fifth. I've taught sixth. And so I have kind of been around the teaching block, so to say. Is that inappropriate? I hope not. But anyways, you know what I'm talking about. So math centers, oh my goodness, they would make me want to literally pull my hair out. I hated math centers, and here's why. But before I tell you, here's what we tell people at RCA when they come to visit us. At RCA, you come and you see a bunch of different things. It's kind of like Walmart. When you go on Walmart, you don't put everything in your shopping cart. So it's the same thing here. I don't want people to think that I am saying this is the only way to do centers or that this is the perfect way, because regardless, you've seen some of my scopes before. A, I'm not a perfect teacher. B, I'm definitely not a know-it-all. But here's what I found to work for me. So if you were kind of in the same position that I was, I hated centers, I felt like I just couldn't get a handle on it, I couldn't keep them organized, then maybe this is for you. If you've got a handle on math centers and you're like, I've got it, then maybe you could use these and kind of change things up a little bit in your classroom. So I'm hoping that everyone will be able to get something from this. If you would like to share it, you can touch the Perry Buddy down in the corner, or I think you can swipe your phone up, down, left, right. I'm not even sure. There's all different ways to swipe your phones depending on what type of phone you have. But I would love for you to share this with people so that they can come in here and join us and maybe grab a tip or two. All right, so here is what is holding my camera, my computer. Whew, let's hope that it doesn't fall down. We'll see. So here's why I hated math centers. I hated math centers because regardless of what grade level I taught, it did not matter if it was first, second, third, fifth, sixth, it does not matter. Whatever grade level I taught, I had learners on every grade level, if we want to call it a grade level. Like, I find it funny that we even say I teach first grade, because really when I taught first grade, I taught kindergarten, I taught first grade, I taught third grade, I taught fourth grade. So, you know, I always had kids on different levels. And when I was using math centers in my classroom, I'm going, okay, here I am making these really awesome math centers, and I've got 10 different ones, and I'm all set up for the week, and I've put in all this work to cut hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of prep, and I have 10 math centers, and I'm so excited about it. And then as I started, you know, kind of being more aware of what was actually happening during that center time, here's what I noticed. It was reaching my middle of the road learners. So it was reaching my grade level learners. That is all those centers were doing. So they weren't reaching my high achieving students. They weren't reaching those students that needed some more scaffolding and practice. And I'm going, what? Hold on a second. I did not become a teacher to babysit. I did not become a teacher to babysit. And I felt like during center time, I was babysitting because I was basically, it was a cute activity to keep kids busy, right? So that I could work with a small group. So it was a cute little activity that kept them somewhat engaged. And it, you know, it would kind of help them, I guess, perfect some math skills that we had been working on. But bottom of the line, every single second in our classroom is precious. That includes center time. So I had to say, whoa, hold on a second. Let me rethink the way that I'm doing centers, because y'all, what was I gonna, like, at first I was like, okay, I got it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make kindergarten centers, and I'm going to make first grade centers, and I'm going to make second grade centers, and I'm going to make third grade centers, and I'm going to make fourth grade centers. And then I'm like, hold on a second. Like, what is that going to look like in my room? How am I just going to have 100 tubs everywhere trying to, you know, fit these centers in? And then how am I going to figure out what kids do what? And so please let me know in the comments by saying amen if you feel the same exact way. Let me know that I'm not the only one that could not wrap my head around centers, because I just could not do it. I could not do it. So if you are like, I'm seeing a lot of amens. Yes, it's not just me. So if you are struggling with math, oh, they all just came in. Yay. If you're struggling with math centers, I think I might have something that would work for you. And the reason it's going to work is because, number one, it is one set of centers for the entire A month. And really, you could leave them up all year. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And B, it reaches every single learner in your classroom. So it will address those that are still not meeting their academic potential, those that are right on target, and those that are striving above. And I have talked a lot about how standards limited me in the classroom. I refused to allow them to limit me. And so I did not just want a set of first grade standards for my centers. I wanted to be able to push those higher level learners. So I'm going to show you how I use math centers. And I've blogged about this a lot, but still some people didn't quite get it. So I talked about it this summer in my conference in Vegas, and so I wanted to share it with all my Periscope peeps as well. So I'm going to talk about how I use those. Now listen, this Periscope could literally go for like an hour. So I'm going to break it up into 3 parts, so don't get stressed out. Here's how it's going to work. Today, I'm just going to talk about how I set those up and how they work. So kind of the logistics behind it. Then I'm going to come back and do 2 additional Periscopes. Not today. I'm going out of town, remember, but it's all about you time. But I'm going to come back, and then tomorrow, sorry, I have a little teacher ADD. Tomorrow, I'm going to be periscoping with Aaron Klein. We're going to do a double, so you're going to hop from one to the other about how to set up your classroom for beginning of the year. So you want to tune in there. But on Sunday and Monday, I will come back and I will talk about how I kept these centers organized, how I kept my students accountable, and then how I assessed them at the end of each week. So I'm going to talk about it. So I'm going to break it down so that way I'm not here for an hour. Y'all know I'm good at that. I could go forever, but we're not going to do that. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to flip you all around, but before I do that, I'm going to get it pulled up on my computer. So let me go ahead and get it up, and then I've got pictures because I am a visual learner. So I've got pictures to show you how to do this. You can screenshot, okay? So you can screenshot things. That hand's a little shaky. Sorry. You can screenshot things, or I'm also going to put a blog post up that has every single one of these slides. So don't worry. Don't feel like you have to write everything down. I've got you. It's coming on the blog as soon as we finish here, okay? All right, so let me go ahead and flip you around. and back this up. Oh goodness, I've got to sit a ways away from my computer, but here we go. I'm going to try to hold the phone and do this at the same time. So I'm going to try to keep it as still as possible. All right, here we go. Math Centers Made Easy. So if you're just joining, I am showing you a way that you can have one set of math centers for every single one of your learners, and it's going to address every single one of their different levels of needs. And I should clarify, these address basic math skills. So here's what I found with math centers. They needed to, in math, you have to have, y'all, I am so sorry. I'm trying to hold this as still as possible. All right, so I talk with my hands, so it's like virtually impossible for me to do this. But math centers, in math, you need that skill and drill, right? You've got to have that repetition of those basic skills of place value, addition, multiplication, subtraction, money, those basic core skills. If they don't have a handle on those, they're not going to follow you on any other area of math. So that's what these centers address. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through it super quick. And then again, don't freak out that I'm not talking about how I assess these or how I organize them, because I'm going to come back and do some follow-up posts, okay? All right, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Here is the setup, and I'm going to kind of zoom in. This is one that I did for January, so basically I changed the theme each month. This was in my 2nd grade classroom, and then here is a different version in my 3rd grade classroom. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in. So basically what I did is I had a skill I had a center or an activity for each skill that I thought was essential in my 3rd grade classroom. So we were doing rounding, subtraction, place value, money counting, number order, addition, multiplication. So I had basically an activity for every single skill that I thought they needed a lot of practice in. Then I didn't want to take a lot of, remember how I talked about all those bins and how I was just like going crazy because they were everywhere. Is this adaptable for 5th? Yes, I'll show you why in just a second. All right, so I basically put them on file folders and put them on the back of a bookcase with the response sheets, which I'm going to show you how every single bit of this works here in just a second. So the setup is super easy because look, it doesn't take any space out of your classroom. It's free your students can access it easily. They're not having to search all over for pieces. They're not having to look for different things. So super easy setup. All right, so I'm going to move on and show you how this works. All right, and this is just kind of another setup to show you how I took the center activity, just cut it out, put it on a file folder, laminated those bad boys, and then cut a little slit at the top so that way that you could slide the response sheets down into the folder. All right, now here are your materials. Get excited because all you had to have, I printed off the response sheets. I would make copies probably every week to make sure there were plenty in there. Your kids needed a response sheet for whatever skill they were working on, and then they had to have playing cards. That's it. 2 things. Count them. 1 and 2. 2 things. How amazing is that? 2 materials. That's another reason I love these is because I wasn't having to constantly cut out materials. It about drove me crazy. I know some teachers that have centers on lock and they impress me to no end because they have got it down to a science. I did not. So are these available in my store? Yes, and I will put links to everything in the blog post. As soon as the scope is over, I'm going to upload this video and get it going for y'all on my blog post so you can reference it there as well. Okay? All right, here's how it works for all my visual people. There's basically different levels. So I'm just going to talk about one of the skills, okay? So let's pretend like one of your students was working on place value. That's one of the skills they were working on for the day. Or maybe let's even pretend that you had 29 students working on place value, okay? So we know we have those kids that are still working with 1 and 2-digit numbers, right? So they're still trying to figure out the ones in the tens place. But then you have kids that need to move on. They should be working in the hundreds, in the thousands, and so on. So here's what happens. Here's the response sheet, right? So this is what it looks like. It gave them an example. So for this one, they're going to be doing the number. They're going to have to write the number. They're going to write the number word in case you can't see it because it's kind of blurry. They're going to have to analyze the digits, so tell you how many tens, how many ones, and so on. Tell you the value of each digit, and then write it in expanded form. Okay, so all of those critical skills that really allow them to master things later on with other math content. All right, so they have to have their playing cards. Now, if they are level 1 and they are working with 2-digit numbers or even 1-digit numbers, they are going to flip over either 1 or 2 playing cards for every single one of these activities. So here's the cool part about this. They could do this activity right here 100 different times, and every single time it will be different numbers. No more of you having to figure out the numbers, of you having to update sheets with new numbers. None of that. Your kiddos are going to be creating their numbers. Also, they have to write the equations. They have to write it down. So it's a lot better practice for them too, because they're not just answering, they're actually creating the equations, okay? All right, so that's a level 1. So say you have a student that's working with 2 digits. Now, we know that some of our students will be bored to tears working with 2 digits, and this time, center time, would turn very quickly into babysitting time because they wouldn't be getting anything from it. So watch. Still working with those same cards, moving on to level 2. Now what they have to do for every single activity is flip over 3 cards. So now they're working with 3-digit numbers. So now you have kids that can be working in the ones, tens, and hundreds place, still working on the same exact response sheet as your students in level 1. They are just using these cards right over here. Now, could you use regular playing cards? Of course you could. I just made them with themes, so that way it looked a little bit different. The kids would always get excited about what theme was coming next month and things like that. So I just made playing cards on my own. Also, I made sure they broke down the numbers, because that way the kids are seeing that. So for example, if they're working in the ones place, they could say, oh, 2 is worth 1, 2. In the tens place, they could say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and figure out that that 7 equals 70. For the hundreds, 100, 200, 300. So I made sure they had things that they could actually touch and see to represent their numbers, okay? Now, in a classroom, of course, you're going to have kids working on 2-digit numbers. You're also going to have kids working on 3-digit numbers. What about if you have someone working on 4-digit numbers? That's fine too, because they can move right on up and start working on 4-digit numbers using the same exact response sheet that your kiddos working in level 1 are working on. So you don't have to make 100 different copies. This is reaching every single one of your learners by using the same, they're all working on the same skill, but they're working with different numbers. So this does not limit your learners. That was my number 1 issue with centers, is I felt like that they limited my students, okay? All right, so I see people asking, how do you know what level they're on? If you don't mind, I'm going to bypass that question now because I still have some things to talk about. That's going to be in post number 2, okay? So you'll have to tune back into post number 2. Otherwise, y'all would be here for an hour, and I know y'all don't want that, okay? So look, again, level 4. Now we're moving up to 5-digit numbers. So now they're working in the 10,000s place. Okay, thank you so much for being patient. I appreciate that. I know y'all don't want to listen to my big mouth all day. So now you have kids in one classroom working with 1-digit numbers, 2-digit numbers, 3-digit, 4-digit, 5-digit. You can keep going. My kids, one thing people say, well, didn't those centers get boring? Here's the thing. Kids love realizing, oh my goodness, I get to move up levels. I get to work with greater numbers. I get to work with numbers that have the thousands place or the 10,000s. And so they were so excited to master a level so that way they could move on to bigger and better numbers, that this kept them so motivated. Plus, they could do as many of these activities in the time slot or in the time they had. And so they would see, how many can I complete? How many can I complete? It was kind of very self-motivating for them because they were working at their own pace and they were challenged. That's why kids get bored with centers, because they're not challenged. So with these centers, they're always challenged. So therefore, they don't have time to get bored because they're constantly moving up levels. Okay? So does that make sense to everyone? If that makes sense, give me a thumbs up. That is why this works for every single grade level, because you can use it for it's not a grade level center. It's a where are your students and what needs do they need to have addressed kind of center. So it's not grade level, so it works with everyone, okay? So I'm going to keep going and just show you one more level. Y'all, we could go on for days with levels. So think about those students, and honestly, here's what I give credit to most for my students being very successful in math is things like this, because I didn't limit them to say, oh, you know what, you're in 2nd grade, you're only supposed to be working with 2 or 3-digit numbers. I said, oh, buddy, are you ready to go on to 6 and 7-digit numbers? Perfect, let's do it. Let me show you how it's done. And so the kids were constantly engaged because of that. All right, so that was with place value. Now remember, I have centers and activities and response sheets for every basic, or pretty much every basic math skill. So I'm just going to show you quickly how it works with addition. So again, blank sheets, right? Completely blank sheets. what the kids have to do if they're in level 1 and they're working with, you could even have 1 digit, okay? I presented this at a 2nd grade conference, so I started with 2 digits. But they're going to flip over 1 number, so they flipped over 13 and they flipped over 23. Then what they have to do is they have to go right over here, write their equation, and solve. Now, I do want to say this because it gets a little tricky, but I think this is really good and beneficial for the students. So listen to this. All right, what happens if your students are in 1st grade and they flip over a 9 and a 4, and they would actually have to regroup in that column? Here is what I did. I told my students that were still working at level 1 that I had not taught how to regroup. I had kids regrouping to the thousands place in 1st grade because of these centers. But if they did not know how to regroup, I said, here's what you need to do. If you have a column that has a number that equals greater than 9, I want you to stop that problem. And I told them, I said, it's not because you can't do it. It's because you haven't learned how to do that yet, and we'll get to it. But here's what that did. It got them really looking out for when a column, the 1s, the 10s, the 100s, equaled something greater than 9, and they knew they would have to do something there. So that's really calling attention for later on when you are using regrouping. That's already getting them attentive to, do I have 2 numbers that equal something greater than 9? I know I'm going to have to do something with those numbers, and then later on you can teach them what that something is, okay? So I don't want you to shy away from these if you teach 1st grade because you're worried they would get to a problem with regrouping. It's perfect. They're looking out for those things, so that way they're aware of them later on. And then same thing, you might have a student working with 3-digit numbers, and here's level 2. So they're going to flip over 3 cards at the top, 3 cards at the bottom. Look, you could even have addition where they're adding another number and another number. Maybe you wanted 4 numbers. This can work however you want it to work. There's not one way. That's why I love these so much, is because they didn't limit me. I could do a million different things with them. So I thought it was perfect for my kids, and they really enjoyed them because it reached multiple learners, not just one specific group, okay? All right. Then I'm going to come back and talk about money sticks later, so I'm going to give you a little teaser on how I implemented these with my centers as well. That will have to be a separate post because I have still got to get packed for this trip. So I'm going to flip you back. All right, so I hope that was beneficial. I hope that you kind of got a handle of how those centers work for me. Again, if you're just now tuning in, the reason that I'm doing this post today is because when I taught math in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th grade, I noticed that my centers were very limiting. However, we have to have that time to work with small groups, right? And so I didn't want that just to be a waste of time. So I figured out a way to make one set of centers that addressed multiple math skills and addressed every single learner in my classroom. So it allowed them to move up at their own pace. It allowed me to scaffold those little babies that were still struggling a little bit. It allowed me to push those guys that were ready to go on. So this is what I found most beneficial for me. Plus the setup was super easy. You had your response sheets. They had to have cards. Now I will say this, and I'll get into this later in future posts, but I also constantly had manipulatives on hand. So that way, if they needed base 10 blocks to make those 2-digit numbers to add together, they could see how that worked. I never just did things that kids could not see. Okay, so I made sure that they had manipulatives on hand, so that way if they got confused, they could see it, they could work it out, and they could figure out the answer without having to have me there to help them every single second. So just really quick, I will take questions. Yes, thank you, Chris. My blog is www.elementaryShenanigans.com. I'm about to put this post up here in just a second along with this video, just in case you missed anything. Okay, so any questions about how the centers work, not about assessment, not about organization, because I'm coming back to those posts, but any questions about how these centers work, how I use them for my kids, I will answer just a few. Do you have 3 directions available to kids? Oh, okay. So no, I just teach them how to do the center, and once they know how to do it, then I say, buddy, I'm so proud of you. You get to move on to 3-digit, and I'll just kind of go through it quickly. But once they've got it, they're like, oh, okay, all I'm doing is adding another digit on, I'm adding another number on. They pick up so quickly. They don't need directions. At the beginning of the year, what I do is I go through every center with them. We play the games together. And, when we're starting off, I'll just give them, we'll all do the same numbers and the same level. And then once they know how to use them, then we're moving, buddy. We don't go back to revisit how to use them. We're just going. I'm giving them harder problems, harder equations, greater numbers to work with. So at the beginning of the year, it's boot camp. You have to teach kids how to do everything. So it's all about making sure that they understand, they know exactly what's expected and exactly what to do. I'll talk about more of that with assessment. Can you use playing cards if you don't have printers? Yes. I would just take out the jokers. I would take out, unless you wanted to make the jokers a 0, you could also do that as well. So you could teach the kids that. Yeah, you can definitely use playing cards if you don't have printers available, because playing cards look exactly like the cards that I just showed you. They have the pictures on them and everything. Could you do this in 6th grade? I would do it in 6th grade. I mean, if I taught small group in 6th grade, I would definitely do it, because they can work into the millions. They can work into the billions. I mean, there is no limit to how these standards work. My husband used them in 5th grade. So he used them with his 5th graders when he taught math, and they were always very successful with that. Do they work with partners or on their own? On their own. I don't like partners for this kind of stuff for one main reason, because I feel like one person does the work, the others sit and watch. So I just don't prefer partners for this. I like for them to work independently, so that way I can see how far they're getting. Now, I do sometimes, I'll have like a math genius, and that changes up sometimes depending on what's going on. And if they're having a really big struggle, they can go ask that person. But most of the time, more than not, it wasn't needed at all. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank y'all so much for joining me today. I hope this was beneficial. I hope it was helpful. If you are wanting to pull your hair out with centers and you're just now tuning in, go back and watch this, because this is a way that you can reach any level learner. I don't like to say that I teach 1st grade, because honestly, I don't just teach 1st grade. Or I don't just like to say I teach 5th grade, because honestly, I don't just teach 5th grade. I teach every grade level up in my classroom, depending on where my kids are at. So this is really beneficial for them. So I hope you enjoyed it. Again, my blog post is going up, www.elementaryShenanigans.com. If you have questions about this, you can post them in that blog. So right below the blog post, you can post comments. So post your questions, and I will address those during my 2nd scope. So I will come back on Sunday, and I will talk about how I organize these, and then on Monday I will follow up with how I assessed my students. So I'm about to head out of town. My husband and I are going to the mountains with some friends. I'm super excited, but I will be back tomorrow with Aaron Klein. We're doing kind of a Periscope hop about how to set up your classroom, so I hope you'll join us. It'll be at 4 o'clock Eastern time, so make sure you check that out. And y'all are so wonderful. Thank you for all the love. Thank you for all the hearts. Thank you for all the comments, and I will see you all tomorrow. Happy Friday, everybody. Goodbye.